This week you have a huge score in front of you, and Mahler was at his compositional height when he composed the 10th, or when he wrote on the 10th symphony, but his personal life was in a total disarray. He was, he had just found out about a heart disease and his wife infidelity.
Well, Mahler's life never was still. He always was in turbulence right from his birth, as he was saying that he was triple unlucky as a Jew born in Prague under Austrian government. And he always felt that there were so many things happening in the world and around him which are so unfair that he was always fighting with something. And I think probably by his nature he was always needed this fight to success. He was also a very non-compromising person as a conductor and as a composer. He was writing so many difficulties for the musicians, difficulties on purpose, difficulties which made a beautiful palette, beautiful picture on the music. And he was, as you said, he went at the very height after the premiere of the 8th Symphony, which was the only symphony immediately recognized as a masterpiece in his life. He moved to New York, finally detached from Vienna, which was a very painful detachment for him. And he was at the glory as conductor and as composer. About his private life, yes, the relation with Alma wasn't easy, and due to many circumstances, they had a turbulent time. But hey, it started. He just literally stolen her from Zemlinsky at the very beginning, and he had a controversy also. His daughter died just a few years before, and about the heart disease, I think he was more, I would say, more thoughtful about this rather than it has been. Because at the end, his misfortune was gained, because he died just a few years before penicillin was introduced and antibiotics, literally from the angine, and that was a virus which goes then to his heart. And if it will be like 3-4 years later, they will cure him just by penicillin. And for him, that was turbulent time. In 10th Symphony, he explores a further way after the 9th. The 9th is basically farewell and departure into some spiritual life, from the human's life, from the body life, into soul life. 10th is more of exploration, what's happening after, how to be reborn, how to be remembered, where are we leading through our spirits, through our souls, and what's going on after end of our physical existence. So for that he started the 10th, he fully completed 2 movements and nearly completed the 3rd one, and left in sketches almost everything else. And his sketches usually were very precise. So he was writing in 4 staves, exactly the whole notes, the whole harmonies and melodies, and very often indicated the orchestration, which then later he was giving to various instruments. And then Derek Cook was completing the version later on in the 60s. And I think it's as close to Mahler as it can be.
Yes, but don't you feel this desperation in his music and tenderness? It's so profoundly sad sometimes.
Well, I think he felt that he could have done much more. And he felt that his time is ticking out. And he felt that it's very little left in terms of time. And he wanted to write more, to conduct more, to create more, to write the literature, and many, many more things. And because of his current needs, being a conductor, needed to supply the family, he was forced to not compose all the time, but to do the concerts. And this is a desperation. This is always a conflict between how much can we do, how much do we need to do, and how much time do we have. And For him, of course, he was always in a hurry, I think. You know? Of course, we don't know him personally, and nothing left us footage of audio or video. But it seems to me that he always was in a hurry of doing the things. He was always looking for something new, for something unknown, to extend the horizons, to talk to the people. He was talking those famous talks with Sigmund Freud at that time.
Went in therapy or talks?
Talks. I don't think there was therapy. I think they were thinkers, both, and their thoughts were very deep. And actually, Freud, in his letters, he was saying that he was really impressed by the ability of Mahler to think beyond the music, to think beyond the world, and to go inside the core of psychology.
In what direction do you think Mahler's music would have developed if he had lived beyond his 50 years?
Difficult to say. The novelties in the language of 7th Symphony, 9th Symphony and 10th Symphonies are quite big. They have a very direct link to Schoenberg, to Alban Berg, to this branch of Second Vienna School, and to some of contemporary music. I don't know, you know, it's difficult to say. I think that maybe in terms of language and existentialism, of course Shostakovich was the closest, who explored further, especially in the 4th Symphony, but then in other symphonies too. There's also existential music by Sibelius, but he stopped writing for a long period, and then he wrote a few pieces at the very end of his life. I think the music definitely will be different, but at the same time, the symphonies of Mahler were literally unknown until 60s. Number 1 was known, a little bit number 5, and the songs. But the rest people didn't know, and they were not premiered in many countries even until 60s or 70s. It's only when Leonard Bernstein started to propagate Mahler's music very, very heavily and with a lot of effort, those symphonies began to be known. And now, each one, I think, performed a lot around the world. It's one of the main core repertoire for any big orchestra.
Yes, it is. I've just heard that the whole cycle was first performed in Liverpool.
In UK, yes.
Yeah, in Europe. But yeah.
Yeah, because there was Sir Adrian Boult, who was a fan of Mahler, and they did it many years back. However, by the archives, I must admit that the audience was quite conservative, so it was growing up in numbers towards the last symphony, but the first couple of symphonies were literally for half-empty halls. We did recently repeat of the cycle in 2014 and 2011, 12, 13, 14 over the years. Now, of course, people appreciate each one as a masterpiece, and they're coming for it, which they are. For that, it's led us to the question of what the composers need for their music to be performed. Not just the quality of the music, but also some luck. Because Johann Sebastian Bach, we probably would not know so much about him if Mendelssohn Bartholdy would not propagate his music in his life. The same about Mahler. If Bernstein will not insist that I would perform this symphony, then we probably would not know so much about the Mahler symphonies.
And what about this version that we are performing, the Derek Cook version? Can you tell us the story about behind that?
Well, Derek Cook with also Goldschmidt and with another musicologist, they found the sketch which I think was given to them by Alma Mahler, and they made a massive work on recovering what's left, what's needs to orchestrate. There are very few bars, very few, literally in the whole score, which written by Derek Cook. Most of it, I would say 98, 99% written by Mahler at the initial. Then they did a massive exploration, and what we perform is actually third version, because the first two, they were not fully satisfied, and then they were elaborating and reworking on them. So this is a final version, which now acknowledged as probably the most formidable version of Mahler 10. There's another version by Rudolf Barshai. Music literally is the same in harmonies, but orchestration is slightly different, and joints between the movements are also slightly different. I would say Barshai version, you can feel more more Slavonic roots in it, because he was initially Soviet Union and then moved out, and because he went having those roots behind him. But this Derek Cook version is, if I wouldn't know that it's not Mahler, but it's someone else written, I would totally think and would be totally convinced that that's Mahler himself.
Well, Mahler is always so emotional, isn't it? And I've heard people saying it literally changes people's life. And do you remember the first time you conducted a Mahler symphony?
First time it was Mahler 1, many years back, I think nearly in conservatoire. It was a big exhaust towards the end, because this music requires, it strangely requires experience, not so much musical experience, but life experience. You need to, Mahler lived through many dramatic moments, and that reflected in his music, even in the most glorifying moments, like fragments of Second Symphony or the Eighth Symphony. You feel that there is this deep background, and to achieve the paradise you need to fight, you need to struggle. And for that you need this experience of drama and experience of struggle in your life. So for that, further you go, more you understand the details and more you understand the essence of existentialism of Mahler. And then, you know, I did a whole cycle a couple of times, and actually from all the pieces, the only one which I haven't done is Das Klagen, the lead. That's planned for the next season. But the rest, a lot of songs, of course, Das Lied von der Erde, all the Knabenwunderhorn, all the symphonies.
Do you have a favorite?
You know, I have, they're all jewels. I have, in my point of view, the one which is really underestimated because of its difficulties, number 7. Number 7 is a great piece. This is probably belongs to the 20th or even 21st century in terms of language, in terms of construction, but it is very hard for orchestra. I think number 7 and this number 10, they're probably the hardest. Even 9th is a bit easier. And I always trying to bring those symphonies to the limelight and to give them more attention. But no, I love all of them. You know, I'm doing, we recently did 1, doing 5th end of this season. I'm also doing 2, 4. I just done 7th this year. Next year is 6th. Next year is 8, 9. So you know, it's one of the main repertoire around
they
the
always
world.
all have their moments of beauty and.
It's a big history. It's a big history of the human, and perhaps it's the last installments in the symphonies which leads to the, strangely, to the optimistic ending, which leads to eternal life. Because then the last big symphonist, in my point of view, was Shostakovich, who, I mean, by amount of symphonies, there's of course many more in the 20th century, but by amount of heritage written symphonies exactly in this genre, it's Shostakovich. But in Shostakovich, due to his time and due to the 20th century, quite often you feel that there's not such a thing as paradise to achieve. Quite often you feel that it's very depressing in a way how the life is. And you feel a different exhaust than in Mahler symphonies. With Mahler, you almost always, even with number 6, you almost always leave the whole with sort of uplifted mood because of this or that happening. With Shostakovich, quite often you're drained, totally drained, and your emotions has gone. You may feel uplifted next morning, but at the moment it's gone. So for that, Mahler is very unique and probably the top of the three of the symphonies.